Hi there, this is Lisa Klein, and I'm so happy to be here today with a good friend of mine, Dr. Julie Lopez, who is lovely and amazing. Julie is an award-winning clinician and entrepreneur. Oh, stop. She's the founder and owner of the Viva Center, which is in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. And she is a brain and body-based mental health specialist who is the author of a fantastic book called Live Empowered, Rewiring Your Brain to Thrive in Business, Love, and Life, which I think I got the title remotely correctly. I got it on the ballpark there. It's a long title. It's excellent.
That was very close, and you just left out the nerdiest part, so it was perfect.
Oh, the implicit memory part.
It's okay. No one knows. I spend all of my talks explaining what that is to people. Thanks so much for having me here, Lisa. I love seeing you always.
You're the best. So I've known Julie for a long time, and one thing that we realized a while ago is that we do very different things, but we work with people who are recovering from trauma. And I've always been very intrigued with the way Julie works because it is so very effective. And as physical therapists, the work that we do, we work with the body part of working to reset trauma and get it out of the body. And what Julie is incredible at is working with the mind and the brain and literally rewiring how your body responds to trauma. And we thought that this was a good time to have this conversation, being we're currently in a situation, as we say. So
thank you, Lisa. You're very entertaining. You should call me, really.
This is why I can't do the processing videos, because I'm like too silly. So Julie, I would love for you to talk to us about what you're seeing with your community and what's happening with people responding to the current traumatic events that are happening. Yeah. And then share with us some resources that people can add to their toolbox to handle this better.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. It has been really a wild time with a whole array of responses that I would say most importantly are normal. And when I say an array, you know, some of the people that I've talked to who do have a trauma history are actually doing pretty okay because of the circumstances that we're in. So they've had to adapt throughout their life to a series of things being out of control or being really difficult or hard to manage. Your hair looks amazing, darling. And so here we are, let's just be honest. Here we are during this pandemic, and all of a sudden, things are very different. People are working virtually. They're not connecting with colleagues, or they've lost their jobs, or loved ones are in quarantine because they're very sick. There's media that's been sharing very scary images and numbers and things. And so there's this combination of experiences that for a lot of people are bringing forward, if you will, whatever tools and resources that they had to manage other difficult times they've had in their life. So that's why I'm saying, so some people who have already been working with or have experienced trauma in their lives are actually pretty adaptive to being able to manage this big change and the limitations because they've learned and they've worked with their system to overcome things. Whereas on the other hand, a lot of people are having really extensive symptoms right now, difficulty sleeping, gastrointestinal problems, headaches, anxiety running pretty high, or depression, although people aren't always recognizing that that's what they're experiencing. They're just feeling extremely exhausted and don't feel like doing anything, a real heaviness in their body. So we're actually seeing a lot of, like I said, a range of mental health type of responses, and a lot of people that are having a lot of symptoms that they didn't have before. And so I am really focused on wanting to help people understand better how their body works and how our mind and body works together, because it really holds a lot of resources for us right now to get through this difficult time. And I want to get a chance to share those with people.
Yeah, that would be great. Before we go any further, let me just ask you, if someone is having a hard time, when do they know, like when should they seek help? Because I know a lot of therapists they're working, but they're working through telehealth. And I have a lot of friends who are in this field, as you know, we have a lot of common friends, and a lot of people's practices are actually growing right now because so many people are having a hard time. So for people who are watching, like, when should people seek professional help?
This is actually a very interesting question, especially right now, because there are different types of help available. And so we actually just last week launched a new way to address what some people are dealing with, which is situational crisis response, right? It's not related to the way things were going. It was brought up just during this time period, and their body's having some type of crisis response. So we put together this package called Healing Through Connection. And it's, with a licensed professional, but it's limited to 6 sessions or less, and it's a greatly reduced kind of pricing, but the focus is all on crisis management and support and resources and helping people feel really empowered within their
love
system.
that.
Because as you know, like when you're doing deeper trauma work, which of course we do all the time, that's our main jam, but it's different when you're doing that deep dive. And some people don't want or need a deep dive right now. What they need is to stabilize their system so they're feeling better in the here and now, because, as we keep hearing, this is going to be a while that we're in this kind of different way of operating in our culture that really has cut out a lot of what we need as human beings, with just touch and socialization and connection and community. And yes, I know everyone's doing everything virtual, but it really is not the same. We know that this kind of connection is not the same as this kind of connection. So that's one thing. The second thing I would say, anytime, I am all about mental health awareness. I think too often in our society, because there is still, unfortunately, a stigma around our mental well-being for some bizarre reason, because we are one human system and we all have a brain and we all have a nervous system and we all have commands that are coming out of our psychology and our emotional reactions to things, because that's normal, because we're not robots. And yet somehow people feel embarrassed or ashamed if they're experiencing anxiety or experiencing depression or having, nightmares or flashbacks or different types of experiences that are actually a part of this whole range of human experiences. So I would say anytime that symptoms related to mental health, and I can go through quite a whole checklist of them, are getting in the way of your day-to-day well-being, you should get help. And this is the reason why, because it doesn't have to be that way. Like pretty quickly, you can change your reality just by connecting with a professional who can help you tap into the resources your body already has. And so I hate to see people needlessly suffering when they just don't have to be suffering that way.
It's interesting because we're all over, Instagram and social media and stuff like that. And there's a big kind of movement where there are people who are harnessing increased creativity, like, we're doing the videos, you're doing, so there's a part when you're kind of in the situation that it inspires creativity. And then I see posts from people saying, well, if you're not doing that, don't be so hard on yourself because it's a traumatic experience, and da 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 da. But I'm like, yeah, it is a traumatic experience, but there are tools to move it through you. That's not really an excuse to like not do anything. Right? And I think that trauma, unfortunately, sometimes is just like the next step is not, okay, and this is what you can do to get out of that trauma lock. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of, this is why I think you and I resonate so much, is because it's like, yes, this is a traumatic experience, but yes, there are tools so that you don't have to become non-functional because of that.
Right.
So yeah, see it, feel it. Let's move that through.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's the big thing is I hate to hear when people feel stuck or they feel no hope. Like there's that this is just what it is and it has to be that way. When I hear people saying it's okay, you don't have to be creative right now, don't feel bad about it, this is really traumatic, what I like to hear, and maybe it's just because I'm an optimist, is that people are trying to add compassion. Because I do know that sometimes people can beat themselves up, like, why am I feeling so down? Or why am I having trouble sleeping? And people can conclude that they're broken. And so we always try at my center, and the way that we work, there are 20 of us that work there, is to find compassion for what's happening and also movement because there's always, we're plastic, we're able to move and stretch and expand. And so that's kind of the stance that we use to help people switch out of and move out of a trauma posture if they're in one. So
I think it's an interesting line to ride, which is providing the compassion and then providing the movement.
Yeah, but let's be honest. I mean, I've been a supervisor for many, many years, and a lot of what I tell my supervisees is we are a profession of change. And so the point is to change. People aren't coming to us because they want to stay the same. They're coming because they want something to be different. So it has to involve this part, right, where it's moving off of where it was. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people right now who want change in lots of different ways.
Definitely. So tell me, so we talked about the 6-visit program, and we'll get the information from you later to put on the description part of the video. So tell me about some of the other resources that are available for people.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things that we launched about 3 years ago, and it's all based on this belief that we have that when people have information, resources, structure, guidance, that there are so many amazing things that can be tapped into within our bodies right now. And so we built this tool called the Resilient Brain Project. And it's www.resilientbrainproject.com. It's free, it's online, and it goes into depth in 12 areas of mental health. So you can just search. It's really easy to search by category of mental health. And let's just say you've been feeling a lot of anxiety. Then you might click on the anxiety section. And underneath that, the first section, which I love so much, is called Actions for Now. And in that section are specific things you can do in the moment right now without a professional and work to shift your system so that it downshifts out of that anxious space. And there are lots of resources because we know we're all unique. We're all little snowflakes. No two people are the same. And so you can just try, hey, does this work for me? Oh yeah. Half of that worked for me. I didn't like this other half. And so you start to custom tailor things and see what works. But more than just exercises, there are like blog posts. They're all action oriented in that section, but there are apps you can connect to help your body change in the moment. So it's like right here and now. And then the other sections that are within each one of these mental health sections are for loved ones. So if one of your realities is that you're sitting here and, 10 blocks away, but you can't connect with them as a loved one who's having all kinds of anxiety, then there are resources for you. Because when we have a loved one who's going through something, we all want to help in some way. And oftentimes, even with the best intentions, we don't do the most helpful things and we can accidentally make things worse. And so we have that kind of resource. There are resources about mastering the subject. So a lot of geeky information about why you might be feeling anxiety and how the brain and body works and what type of systems, the different systems in your body might be experiencing. And then we've got You're Not Alone. So on this section of that category, it would be places where you can go online. You don't have to say a thing in case you aren't ready to connect or don't want to talk about what you're going through, but you can go to chat rooms or go to bigger spaces where you see that other people are actually experiencing what you're experiencing. And that could be super powerful. I mean, that's what we see really making a difference when we do group therapy, because there'll be someone else that you don't even know who's telling your story, and they don't know your story. And in a visceral way, you feel like, oh, wait, I'm not crazy. This person is great and they're going through this. So maybe I'm great too. It can really be a beautiful thing. And then we've got a whole section on advocacy. So that one's it might be called Advocate or something like that. But there are always advocacy groups and national and international organizations where they're trying to raise awareness and destigmatize whatever area. So we have these 5 sections under the 12 sections. Anyway, it's just chock full of stuff and great apps. And I think apps are great because, when people come for therapy, they're paying big bucks for that, right? That's the custom tailored. You come in and you're going to get everything custom tailored to your system and what it needs. It's like the creme de la creme of service, but there's an awful lot you can do just by becoming empowered around how this stuff works. So it's a huge resource and I highly recommend it for people. We created it because we really want to destigmatize mental health and help people get accessible resources to be able to start to gain control over what they're experiencing. And I always say to people, look, if you go there and you look at some of the resources and it helps you enough, great. And if it doesn't, and it feels like there are other things that are getting in the way, to be honest, because Lisa asked about my book, this is my book. This is why I wrote the book, because it's all about implicit memory, which is a fairly complicated subject, but it's written in an easy to read type of way. I wrote it because it's all about the parts of our brain that are hidden. The parts that if you're working with a professional, they're going to be able to pull forward and they're going to be able to rework and, you know, do all these nerdy things with it. So this is also like an empowerment tool to start to get curious and start to understand why your body or why your behavior or why your relationships might be different than you want them to be. And especially during the situations that make no sense, like, why is it that I am a very accomplished person in all these areas and I want to be in an intimate relationship, yet every time I connect with someone who on paper seems fine and I seem fine, I push them away. And I know that I want that in my life, but yet I still push them away, and it seems confusing. And so, you know, that just as an example, there are lots of things that we end up doing that are actually more a result of this hidden part of the brain. And there we have more advanced techniques for that. But it's a great first start. And so the Resilient Brain Project is something I recommend very highly because, you know, it, like I said, not only has the actions for now, but also has these apps that can help you in a daily way. There's a really cool one in case, I mean, people are talking about this all the time, but in case you picked up some bad habits while you're in quarantine, there's a cool app called Habit Bowl, which helps you break.
Judgy for those of us who are binge watching RuPaul's Drag Race.
Is that
Don't judge me?
Well, if it's working for you, great. And if at some point you want to change that, you can take a look at Habit Bowl and try to break some of your habits, or it also helps you create new habits. It's got this whole incentive reward system. But I love apps because you can, if you like one or you connect with one, you can use it every day to help you. Especially, oh my God, everyone's talking about meditation and deep breathing. There's a couple apps on there that can help with that, because if people are like, just meditate, you've never meditated, it can feel really bizarre or uncomfortable. And so having guided spaces where you can just tap in, like Headspace is a great app for a whole host of different guided meditations, can be really helpful.
So are you seeing certain populations are more at risk at this time? You're saying that people who have had trauma and have had trauma therapy are actually maybe having more tools than the average person. But are there people that you see that are just in general need to be a little bit more concerned about watching themselves and what they do with habits and stuff like that?
I don't know that I would lump it into one category. Obviously, I mean, at my center, we have quite a number of first responders that are being inundated with real situations that are very overwhelming. So, I mean, that's a population that's having a hard time, but they also don't have the time to do a lot of personal work, which is compounding part of the problem. Like I said, you know, the reason we launched the Healing Through Connection package is because when you're in an environment that isn't really changing, it's hard until you're out of it to do some of the deeper work and to shift stuff, because your body's adapting in whatever way feels like it's best for your system. And so some of the crisis and support management might be more helpful. But in terms of populations, you know, I couldn't speak to that in terms of people who come into us. I can tell you theoretically that, you know, the people who are now in lockdown and already had a really difficult home life, people that were having difficulty in relationships or even experiencing domestic violence, are obviously in a really tough moment right now. Children who are in abusive homes where school was the break, people in relationships where work was the break, and now they're in a very controlling or toxic home. That's really high risk, I would say, right now. I didn't mean to oversimplify about the trauma piece. I just wanted to introduce the range because because I also think that for some people who have been using distractions that were readily available to them to manage trauma from before, meaning that they hadn't really dealt with certain things, and now here they are kind of stuck at home, stuck in one space, and don't really have escape from themselves. That can be a really challenging situation right now too.
The things to look out for, let's say if you are on your own, and so looking out for maybe low energy, having a hard time, you're saying with fatigue, like not able to get off the couch kind of thing.
Not able to get off the couch, trouble sleeping, trouble falling asleep,
Okay.
trouble in the middle of the night with nightmares or waking up and not being able to go back to bed. Like I said, some of the stuff that's more related to your unconscious mind, I call it the hidden control panel in your brain, can be coming forward in your sleep. So we store things in this unconscious part of our brain, and they can come from experiences that happened before you have conscious thought, like before the age of 3, but they can also be passed down from generations. So grandparents, parents have distressing experiences. They never talk about them, but they pass on the energy of their experience to a descendant. It's called intergenerational trauma. One of the populations that can experience this that I've worked with a lot are second and third generation Holocaust survivors, grandparents who have a war room or who are ready to hide or flee at a moment's notice because they lived through it, even though they never told any stories. In behavior, the feeling that life is unsafe and that people can get hurt very quickly is translated on. And so we store that kind of posture, right? Even as children who never experienced a horrific thing like the Holocaust or the concentration camps. And so in the night, because this feels like another, like, especially if you watch the media a lot, like who has power over what, which of our rights are going to be taken away, at what point is it going to become a military state? I'm just saying, if you're looking through that lens, and that type of stuff can come up in the night. When things like that are happening that seem unexplainable, that's a sign that you should go get professional help. Only because the suffering doesn't have to go on for that long. And I wanted to share, because a lot of what I do, so like I said, there are 20 people at our center. Everyone has postgraduate training in some type of brain or body-based therapy and certification. And so for me as a brain-based practitioner, we can do all of this stuff virtually. We can do EMDR, we can do brain spotting virtually. It doesn't have to. And so if there are things going on that seem unexplainable, or all of a sudden it seems like you're having symptoms that you didn't have before, it just could be that stuff is getting kicked up from your implicit memory, and it's very treatable. So I would just say you want to get professional help if you start, having some of those kind of problems.
So what I'm hearing you say is that this is, in this trauma experience that we're having, it's not uncommon that old traumas that you've experienced yourself that have not been healed may be coming up to the surface, because we're not having the distractions of travel and commute, like we're all kind of in our own spaces right now. But also traumas that may have been handed down by generations may be also activated if those were traumas around survival.
Yes.
And we've seen that. We've seen that in our practice. If somebody's coming in, we talked about this in one of the other videos. The pancreas is the part of the body that holds that survival energy when it's something that could, be that bad. So we will see that in descendants of people who made it through the Holocaust. It's absolutely fascinating. But for people in general, it could be having had an immigrant experience that was difficult. My dad was in World War II. My parents went through the Depression. So it could be traumas that you have had in your family line that now are becoming activated.
That's totally right. And let's be real. I mean, we both live in Washington, D.C. There are a lot of people that live here because there was war in their home country. They left because of situations of violence. So, and it's not just the survival piece that could be triggering it. There are also a number of factors at play right now that can trigger the old unresolved experiences of trauma. One is that we have lost control over lots of things that we used to have control of before. So the experience of being out of control can ignite that. Many people are isolated, so a feeling of being disconnected can kick up any type of abandonment or rejection or loss. There's a lot of losses going on in our society right now. Anyone who was meant to experience a graduation or a birthday, people who are dying during this time period are not getting the traditional, Shiva or the funerals. It's not happening. And so there's a lot of ways that grief and loss has changed in our culture during this time, because we have rituals to allow people to process things, so they're getting truncated. Anyway, it's a very complicated time for mental health. So yeah, when you talked about the survival instinct triggering things up, I think there's actually a lot of factors happening now that could be a trigger for people.
Yeah, it's a very interesting phenomenon. And I think it's also interesting, it's affecting the entire country.
Yeah.
It's not like some people can leave their homes and some people can't. Well, I mean, kind of, but we're all the restaurants are closed. It's a little bit more, a little bit different from like 9/11, in our lifetimes. I'm thinking about what we've experienced, and 9/11, was terrible, but, for New York, for Washington, where we had actual events, for Pennsylvania, but the rest of the country was affected, but not as directly. And the same thing with 2000. So this is the first thing that I can remember in my lifetime that I'm aware of. When I was, I think, Vietnam, I was very small, so I don't remember those things, but where everybody is collectively experiencing a big lifestyle change.
Yeah.
It's kind of a very interesting situation that way.
I did an interesting exercise. So I have gone in to speak to companies. Well, I haven't gone anywhere, frankly, but it's virtual. I've done kind of virtual check-ins with organizations just around their own wellness and stress management and overall well-being. And I did an interesting exercise with one where I had each person talk about what they miss about their life from before this all happened and what they're enjoying more now that they have access to or that they're making room for in their life that they weren't from before. And it was a really interesting experience for this group of almost 50 people, because it gave them a public space to acknowledge a loss out loud and express it and be heard, by their colleagues, and then to express some gratitude or some acknowledgement that there were some gains during this time too. It was really a powerful exercise for everybody.
I think it's very complex because we're so lucky in so many ways. Our businesses have been affected, but I'm not super concerned about whether or not I'm going to have food, where there are a lot of people who are not in that situation. So there's a lot of layers to this, where you have the people who are more privileged, however you want to say it, who are taking a hit. We're all taking a hit. But again, eating is not something I'm concerned about not doing. And then you have an enormous segment of the population that is very food insecure right now. So it's monumentally, I don't even know what the right word would be. You have all these layers of, then feeling like, oh, one of my benefits is I've been exercising more, it's like, woohoo. But, then you feel bad, like people don't have money to feed their kids. So it's like you have a hard time focusing on the positives for yourself when so many people are suffering to that level.
Yeah,
it's a very difficult time.
it is difficult. And I think one of the things that you're bringing up, which could maybe be a topic for another time, is comparative guilt, right? And comparative loss. And the struggle with that, which is also kind of very workable in a mental health setting, is that it doesn't allow you to process your own experience, right? And so I know that our focus here was more on mental health and access to resources and things like that, but I would love to give a little focus to this program that I brought up to DC for DC people called In This Together.
That'd be great.
where people can, and we ended up, because it's based out of San Antonio, and that's where kind of the donations are going in, and they did get their 501c3, even though it just started during the pandemic. But we brought up a chapter to DC where if anyone wants to donate, or they can get these shirts or masks that they created called In This Together. All of the proceeds are going to local nonprofits who are helping the food insecure. So we've been able to give donations to So Others Might Eat and the Salvation Army, and a couple of different programs that are traditional housing programs. But you talk about like job loss. One of the ones that we gave to last week, 60% of the participants had lost their job and they're very food insecure. And so being able to give them a food donation, the way the program works is the money goes to a restaurant. They greatly discount the food prices because we do bulk ordering. And then it goes, I think we're up to maybe like 800 or 900 meals that we've been able to do just in a couple of weeks. So that's on our website too, but that's real.
Great. I mean, I think I own a business. I have my employee. So my focus has been on my business and my employees. And so, as I'm sure yours has been as well. And then, as you know, I'm also in the process of moving, so that I feel like, you know, my entire day is occupied with things that I'm doing to deal with all these things right now. And once things calm down, I'm like, I really, you know, you hear about all these people. It's like, I want to do way more for people who have it way worse than I do. It's just a matter of like, when am I going to find that time? So but you know, there's a level of guilt, and there's a level of compassion, and, you know, so it's an interesting thing to see where your mind goes and where your heart goes right now.
Yeah. And it's complicated. But I can tell you, for your system, when you can tap into pleasure, like what you're enjoying in the moment, which is a more present day focused, it is the antidote for anxiety and depression, right? Because anxiety as a mood is future focused, which we're seeing all the time on the media. All the projections, all the what ifs, all the flatten the curve, all the da 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 da. That's all future. And that causes anxiety. It causes hypervigilance. It causes all that scanning type of thing, like, and then the past stuff, like what happened in the past, things you regret, all of that causes the heavy feeling. And so, you know, if you're in the moment able to say, wow, I'm exercising more and I'm actually getting enjoyment out of that, and I am happy right now in this moment, it is the antidote for those mood things. And being able to feel grateful for something is also the antidote. So in a way, with mental health, we're trying to get those very pure present experiences to be more accessible. And so the guilt thing, I get that. It's real. And there are people all around that are suffering in catastrophic ways because of the economy or because of their lack of access to support or resources. But as much as you can from a mental health standpoint, we want to be able to access kind of those present day things that help our system, like exhale.
Yeah. Excellent. So just to recap, so we have the 6-visit
Healing Through Connection. It's called the Healing Through Connection package.
We're going to put all this in the description so people can have that. I love that. I think that's so brilliant.
Yeah, it's my brilliant team. I can take no credit.
What?
I take no credit. It was my brilliant team.
But you're the head of the team, so that's okay. I take credit for everything my team does. I'm just kidding. So, not really. So the Resilient Brain Project, which is that's fantastic because that's a free resource. So if people are concerned about, again, going to therapy, virtual, if they don't have the money for that, they can go on the Resilient Brain, that website, and get those apps, which sounds incredible. And then In This Together project for food insecure, that's wonderful. And then
I have more things I forgot. Now that
oh my God, lay them on me. Let's go.
Every Friday at noon, I'm doing a community gathering space. It's not therapy, but it's more, let's get a little education on a topic, and I'll give you an experiential exercise. And then most importantly, we're going to connect and resource share. And if people want to ask kind of custom tailored questions, they can get responses. That's called Learning Through Connection. It's all about connection. So that's every Friday.
Huh? I sense a theme.
It's a theme. So that's on Fridays at noon with me. And then we also have a bunch of free videos on the website. So we've been doing these shorter videos, like 5 minutes.
On which website? The Viva?
On the Viva Partnership website. If you click on kind of, I think it says mental health during COVID-19, this is where all of the free and low cost resources are listed for people to access. But a lot of them are focused on an experiential thing. So the videos are all like, here's an experiential exercise, try it now. They're short with the idea of trying to reach people.
I love that. This is so wonderful.
Thanks, man. I didn't even think about that part.
There. What?
What?
You've been a busy bee behind the scenes there.
It's just because I have a big team that does a lot of stuff. It makes me look like I get a lot accomplished. It's really a lot of other people.
That's okay. Well, this has been incredibly helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And we're going to put this on our website and put it on our social media so that people can have access to you and all of your incredible wisdom.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I love your Buddha with the tiara on the back, by the way.
Thank you. Isn't that so me?
Yeah, right under Ganesh and collection back there.
The tiara fit on the Buddha, so I figured that was, where it belonged. So why not?
Perfect.
Exactly. All right. Love you, and I'll talk to you soon. And have a good day.
Thanks. Bye, Lisa.